All right, welcome back to ABA exam review and the continuation of our RBT practice question series where we're going through another set of questions together and breaking them down. If you're new to the channel, welcome. If you're returning, welcome back. Please like and subscribe. Check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials, including our combo pack. When you pass your exam, let us know so we can include you in the Sunday shout out. Work hard, study hard. Let's get going. You're chatting with your client's mom during session. She mentions the extinction procedure that the behavior analyst taught her last week and says that she is not comfortable with the behavior that occurs as a result of extinction. How should you respond? Now, in this scenario, you're going to be the behavior technician. You're chatting with the client's mom, which is good. You want to develop a rapport with your client's parents, and you can do that with conversation. However, in this scenario, you need to figure out how to respond because the client's mom isn't just asking about your day or casual conversation. She's talking about one, the extinction procedure, so the intervention, and then more specifically is saying she's not comfortable with behavior. So immediately in this scenario, there's one thing you should be thinking, and that's I need to contact my supervisor immediately because although you are the technician, you need to have a good relationship with the mom. You're trained on these procedures. It's not your role as a technician to modify the interventions or retrain parents or tell parents how to implement the interventions. So, how should you respond to this mom who is not comfortable with the behavior she's seeing as a result of extinction? A, explain to her that the behavior may increase at first, but will then start to decrease eventually. That's true. However, we're not talking about the extinction burst and the mom not understanding the extinction burst. She's not comfortable with the behavior at all. And so that's an immediate red flag where if we're going to be using extinction, we need the extinction to be happening pretty much 100% of the time or as close as possible. So if the mom's not going to be doing extinction because of the behavior, well, it doesn't matter why the behavior is occurring. We have to address that. B, let her know that you will pass on your concerns to your supervisor immediately. Absolutely. Always a good response as the technician is I will reach out to my supervisor and I will get back to you. You should let them know immediately that this procedure is making the parent uncomfortable. C, encourage her to continue the intervention, at least for another week. C is not your role as a technician. It's not your role to tell her to continue doing something she's not comfortable with. You have to get your supervisor and get their opinion first. And then D, retrain her on the procedure to make sure she's doing it correctly. Again, not your role, right? The supervisor has to make the decision here. The behavior analyst, who's your supervisor, trained the parent on this procedure. The parent's having an issue with the procedure. It's now up to the supervisor to decide how will you proceed. Now, if you tell your supervisor that, well, the parent isn't comfortable, then they're going to give you direction. They may tell her to explain it, may tell you to explain it more. They may tell you to encourage her. They may tell you to retrain her. But until they do that, you shouldn't do anything except let the supervisor know the concerns. And then you should tell the mom the supervisor will get back to them. George's deadline to submit his final thesis is in 1 week. The thesis must be 30 pages long, and George has 10 pages written. George wants to figure out how many pages per day he needs to write to reach the requirement. What measure should he use? So we have a measurement question here. And in a measurement question, you want to try to figure out a couple of things. What are you measuring and what is your goal? What are you trying to accomplish? In this case, George is trying to submit his thesis. The thesis must be 30 pages long and he has 10 pages written. So George wants to know how many pages per day he needs to write to reach the requirement. Now, the most important piece of information here is the how many pages per day. When we talk in terms of frequency per time, what are we talking about? We're talking about rate. So if the number of pages is our frequency and the day is our time, we're looking at a frequency per time or A rate. Why is it not B, percentage of occurrence? Well, George isn't trying to figure out how often his behavior happened given the amount of opportunities. B doesn't really fit. He's not looking for C, duration. He's not looking at how long it might take. He needs to know how many pages he needs to write. So he's looking for a number. He's looking for a frequency, not necessarily how long that might take. And he isn't looking for inter-response time. Inter-response time might be how long does it take in between pages that he writes. Again, that's not what he's measuring. That's not his goal. He's measuring how many pages he needs, and his goal is to figure out how many pages per day he needs to finish the requirement. And so to measure that, he needs to use rate. Rate is frequency over time. Frequency is our pages, time is our day. Garrett gets severe heartburn whenever he eats spicy food, so he won't eat spicy foods for a couple of months after getting heartburn. However, eventually he will eat spicy wings or pasta again after a few months have passed. What might describe this scenario? All right, kind of a challenging question, so let's think about it. We're looking at the scenario as a whole. We know Garrett gets heartburn when he eats spicy food. We can say the response is eating spicy food, the consequence is heartburn. When he does that, he doesn't eat spicy food for a couple of months. So what's happening? He's being punished, right? He eats spicy food, he gets heartburn, he stops eating spicy food for a few months because the heartburn was punishing. However, eventually he starts to eat spicy wings and pasta again. So he's been punished, his behavior is punished, and all of a sudden, it's back. Why might that occur? Why might a behavior that was punished come back? A, heartburn is reinforcing Garrett's behavior of eating food. Well, we know that's not true, right? Because whenever he gets heartburn, he stops eating spicy foods for a couple of months. So we know the heartburn is punishing him, at least temporarily. What about B? Punishment from heartburn is not permanent. Yes. One of the issues we have with punishment is it isn't permanent. And so when you punish a behavior, it's so important to teach a replacement because if you don't, eventually, especially if the punishment stops, it's very likely that behavior will return. So we've always got to remember that punishment is not a permanent thing. C, heartburn is put on extinction when Garrett doesn't eat spicy food. Heartburn is the consequence. We don't put the consequence on extinction. We put the behavior on extinction. So we're not putting heartburn on extinction. And then D, Garrett likes spicy food more than he dislikes punishment. D is not a very behavior analytic way to describe this. It doesn't really matter what Garrett likes or dislikes. We're worried about the consequences and the effects on his behavior. All we know is eat spicy food, get heartburn, get punished, stop eating spicy foods, eventually eat spicy foods again because B, punishment from heartburn, is not permanent. Lonnie just learned how to do a card trick from watching YouTube videos. He feels confident doing it by himself as long as no one is around to watch. But Lonnie wants to perform for others. What step would be most relevant for Lonnie to take to achieve his goal of performing for others? Now, I think this is a pretty simple question and something you probably should be able to predict once you get fluent enough. Because what we're looking at is what Lonnie needs to do to achieve his goal of performing for others. So immediately when you hear that and you think that Lonnie knows how to do this card trick from watching YouTube videos and he can do it by himself, and now he wants to do it for others, what immediately comes to mind? To me, is generalization, right? When we start doing behaviors in novel environments and new environments and untrained environments for untrained people, that is talking about generalization. So Lonnie clearly wants to start generalizing his skill. So what step could he take now to achieve that goal? A, continue practicing by himself until he can do the card trick without any mistakes. Well, that's great for fluency, but it doesn't help generalization. How can Lonnie generalize to other people? B, continue practicing by himself, but in a different location as to encourage generalization. True, but we're not worried about the location. Our goal, never forget the goal, is performing for others. So if this was said, if the question said Lonnie wants to achieve his goal of performing in a arena, right? Well, that's a different location. We're talking about for others. C, continue practicing the trick, but ask a friend or relative to provide feedback. Good. Now we're getting somebody else involved. C is trying to achieve the goal. B is generalization. C is generalization for the right goal. And then D, any of these would lead to Lonnie achieving his goal. Not necessarily. The best option here is going to be C. Get somebody else involved. Where do we want to generalize, or who do we want to generalize to? We want to generalize for others. So by continue practicing the trick, asking a friend or relative to provide feedback, that's going to give Lonnie the opportunity to start generalizing his skill. Which of the following answer choices least describes prompting as it is used in applied behavior analysis? Kind of a broad general question. We are talking about prompting when we evoke a response through a cue or a gesture or a model or some other form of prompting. And we need to find the answer choice that least describes it. So, what least describes prompting? That word is very important. Least describes. A, prompting is used to cue or encourage the response that you would like to see. 100%. That's almost the definition, right? It's a cue, it's encouragement for the response we want to see. Nothing wrong with A. B, prompting is an antecedent to the response. It's also true, right? The prompt comes before the response. C, prompting is only used during the initial phases of skill acquisition or behavior reduction. Is that true? Do we only use prompting when we first teach? No. Typically, we'll use more prompting when we first start teaching, but you can use prompting at any point. Let's say we're working on maintenance and it's months down the road. You might need a prompt to get going. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. So C is the best answer so far. And then D, prompting is planned for and implemented systematically. That is also true. So what answer choice least describes it? It's going to be C. Prompting is only used during the initial phases of skill acquisition or behavior reduction. Thank you for watching. Check out btexamreview.com for all of our study materials. Please let us know when you pass. Let us so we can add you to the Sunday shout out. Subscribe if you haven't already. Work hard, study hard. We'll see you soon.